The following is a program of the Santa Barbara County Education Office. To learn more, visit sbceo.org.
Hi, I'm Susan Salcido, Santa Barbara County Superintendent of Schools, and I am so delighted to introduce our guest today, Michael Nowak, Music Director for the Santa Maria Philharmonic. Michael, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Susan.
Really appreciate that you're here. Can't wait to hear about the Philharmonic here in the Santa Maria Valley. But let's start with you as a child growing up. Put us in the place where you were growing up. Where was it? Tell us about your family.
Right, well, I started on the east coast of our country in Rhode Island. I was born in Providence, Rhode Island, and then my family moved to Warwick, which is the second largest city in Rhode Island. And both my parents were school teachers, so education was part of my whole life, being around schools and being around programs and being around creative ideas. It was always fun to watch what my parents were up to.
What grades did they teach or subjects?
My dad taught industrial arts.
Wonderful.
So he was into drafting and woodworking and things like that. And so we were always having something being created around our house.
Around your house.
Yeah.
And what about your mom?
Science teacher and then a guidance counselor.
Ah, fantastic.
And she went into the high school level later on.
So always service-minded, but also education-minded.
Absolutely.
And that's something that is instilled in you clearly.
Definitely.
With the work that you've done and do currently. Let's talk about the schools you attended. Elementary, junior high, high school, and we'll get to college too.
Right, so I went to 3 different elementary schools when I was growing up. We moved once, but then we shifted districts, and that's where my music started taking shape, because I was in 3rd grade class in one of our elementary schools, and they were painting the room.
Okay.
So they told all the students, you have to leave the room, you have to go into the auditorium. So we all went into the auditorium, and I sat down, and on the stage of the auditorium was a violin player who was part of a program of the elementary school, string program, and they were going to have a concert at the end of that week or the next week, and he was up there playing his violin, and I just was like, wow, I like that.
I like that.
I want to do it. And that was 3rd grade, and so I went home and said, guess what, guys, I want to play the violin. And they were like, no, I don't think so. But we didn't have to decide until the next year.
Okay.
And then 4th grade, we could take string instruments, which was a wonderful thing to have offered in schools, to have orchestras and string players and violins and cellos and basses. And when I got to be in 4th grade, it was time. The teacher said, anybody want to take an instrument? And I raised my hand. I said, yeah, I want to play the violin. And so I went home and I brought a violin home. And my parents were like, it's too squeaky, but no. Right away, I was able to get a really nice sound.
Really?
I got a nice instrument that had a good sound.
Wow.
And we all got happy. It's like, well, this is pretty fun. And so we had a teacher that would come in once or twice a week during school to teach violin. And so if you were in class and they would say, Mr. Cuddy's here now, and anybody's going to go play your violin, go with Mr. Cuddy. And so we would go to the auditorium, and we had violin class, and that went on for several years. And
I'm envisioning you right now, 4th grade, with your violin, going to music class, and
walking with my little case.
Walking with your little case, and hearing beautiful, sweet music coming out of this violin, something that you'd never picked up before.
No.
Then.
No.
Isn't that something?
It is something. I mean, one never knows. And that's why I'm passionate about bringing that to students.
Yeah.
I think it's super important. The earlier, the better. And as much opportunity, the better. It's such a wonderful calming influence on students. It gives them a chance to be creative and individual and work through issues and problems and develop techniques and things that are really long-term educational a process, so that we're, especially these days, we're so used to instant gratification. You can look up something in a moment,
Right.
but to play the violin, you can't learn that in a moment. So you have to learn how to learn.
That's right.
And it takes a while, and you have to learn when to practice and how to practice. And luckily my parents caught on and thought, he's doing very well, let's get him some private lessons. And so we got to have a private teacher as well, and that kept motivating me more and more. And then it just seemed like the right thing for me to be doing in my life. They would always say, well, what do you want to do when you grow up, kind of thing? And I'd say, well, I want to play music. And they would, yeah, but what do you really want to do? And I said, play music. And finally they got the picture that that's something that was very passionate to me, and still is.
Clearly.
Yeah.
I love that story. And we talked about the 3 elementary schools you went to, junior high, high school, and did you play, clearly you played music all along, and did you change instruments up through high school or junior high?
I added instruments.
Did you?
Yeah, in junior high I took up the clarinet, and so I was in the band, in the marching band. And then when I was in high school I added tuba.
Wow.
So I was a brass player too. So strings, woodwinds, and brass.
Could see a Philharmonic society happening, building right there.
Didn't get to the percussion instruments though, yeah.
And so where did you go to college, and what did you major in?
Well, my first year of college I went to Boston. I went to Boston University, and I was in their music program there. And I was just the first year of school you don't really declare what kind of major. You're just taking music classes, but mostly the other classes, the academic classes, English class, history, science, that kind of thing, just so you can fulfill that accreditation.
Right.
But we also had a lot of music classes as well. At the end of my first year, I didn't feel like this was a right fit for me, and a very good friend of mine was transferring to Indiana University. And I didn't know anything about Indiana University, but it turns out Indiana University is like one of the top music schools in the world. I mean, it's incredible. There's an outstanding faculty there. There's 500 music majors.
Wow.
There are 8 orchestras or 6 orchestras going on all the time. I mean, it's just music, music, music. There's opera playing, there's chamber music. It's
Really
very
rich and diverse.
completely wonderful. And the teaching, and that's the main thing. When you found a teacher that just inspired beyond your imagination. And so I was playing violin at the time, and the viola teacher that was there at Indiana turned out to be a man named William Primrose, who was the greatest violist of all time. And still, I mean, he was the master. And I went to his master class, and I sat in and I thought, that's what I want. I want to be like him. I want to do what he does. And it didn't matter what he did. If he had played tennis, I would have been a tennis player. If he had,
Something about him.
yeah, well, he was a master.
A master. So say a little bit more about what that means in terms of, you saw him, I mean, you were awestruck. He is a master.
Right.
At that point, it was for viola.
Yes.
So what are some of the characteristics that came through and you said, wow, this is someone special?
Well, he was a virtuoso performer. And he was the top of the top of the top, capable on it. And great composers wrote pieces for him, viola concertos for him. He toured with all the great musicians of that era. He played in the NBC Symphony with Toscanini. He recorded Jascha Heifetz. I mean, he was the top of the top of the top. And his ability to take you on an inspirational journey was unbelievable, because he used to do things that we never even thought were capable of happening. Just sounds, making you think of different ways of listening to yourself, and little tricks, things like that, that it just were like doors were being opened every time he said something. And he would often say to me, you may not know what I'm talking about right now, but 10 years from now you will.
And was it true?
Still happening.
Is that right?
Yeah. And I mean, I was very honored that he took me under his wing and knew that I wanted it so badly, even though I wasn't at the level that I had been later on. He allowed me to grow, and just threw a whole bunch of information at me, and just take it when it comes.
Wow. Pretty remarkable.
Yes, it was pretty remarkable. I was very, very fortunate. And I think that's, one of those things where if you hit the right moment in your life and doors are open, go.
Yeah.
Try it out and see what's there. I had a very important teacher in my life one time. I was trying to make a decision what to do with my career, but I stayed in Dallas. I got a job in Dallas, and then a job opened up in Los Angeles, and I couldn't decide whether to stay in Dallas or go to Los Angeles. And my friend said, if you look out a door, all you see is the hallway ahead of you or a wall ahead of you. But until you're outside the door, you don't know if there's a left or a right. And so you have to make that step first. And then once you get there, you can say, okay, I can go over there or I can go over here. And that's one of those things where opportunities arise. Sometimes you don't feel ready for them, or you're not quite sure if this is the right thing to do. But if you don't do it, then you won't know. So
It's a really nice way to put it. I've heard a lot in terms of trying something. Why not try it? You won't know till you try. But the way you put it, or the way that person put it for you, you painted a nice picture, and probably are helping a lot of people who are hearing you today. They're thinking, maybe I will step through that door and look left and right, for sure.
Oh, good idea,
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, very.
Tell me again the name of the viola teacher.
William Primrose.
William Primrose. So what would he say today, knowing you are the maestro of the Santa Maria Valley Philharmonic?
He would say, I didn't even know you liked to conduct.
Ah.
Because he didn't know me as a conductor. He only knew me as a viola student. And when I was leaving Indiana, I got a job in Dallas right away, my first job right out of school. And I told him that I got this job. And that's what he said. Oh, I didn't know you conducted.
Oh.
And I think that was kind of a surprise. Yeah.
Can you share with us your path to coming to the Santa Maria Valley? Because you're starting. You talked about Boston to Indiana, Indiana to, I think, Dallas. To Los Angeles, but keep going. What's your path?
And Los Angeles is still there. It's still part of my daily life.
And what is that?
It's going down to the recording studios and doing soundtracks for movies.
Fascinating.
And I've been doing that for many, many years. And
can you share a little bit about what that would look like? If we followed you with a camera to Los Angeles, what might that look like?
Well, you show up at Fox Studios like we did yesterday,
Okay.
and you hand the guard your little name tag or your license and say, I'm going to recording. And they give you a parking place and they show you where to go. You walk in there and there's a room full of music stands and microphones and people passing out music and getting ready for the recording session. There's a gigantic screen behind the orchestra. There's a conductor up front who's looking at the music. And we're many times seeing the music for the very first time. So we're sight reading.
I was just going to ask you. So it's sight reading. Wow.
And that's a skill in itself.
Sure.
I mean, I think it's like any reading in a way. The people that read all the time can read really well all the time. And it's a skill that goes away quickly if you don't do it often enough, but it comes back quickly too. So your brain kind of switches. It's a really interesting thing. And so we were in a room full of people that are there for that particular project, as opposed to if I were in the Los Angeles Philharmonic or San Francisco Symphony, I would be with the same people day in and day out for as long as I'm there.
Sure.
When you go to do a movie project, we know the same people, but they may not be the same people sitting next to you, or they're interchangeable. Maybe you'll see some new people. And
those who are called for it.
for that job,
Right.
yeah, exactly.
And what instrument are you playing? Did you play yesterday for
Viola. I played viola.
viola? Okay.
For Jumanji 3.
Fantastic. We are all going to look for your name when the credits roll.
Unfortunately, they don't put our names there.
What will it be under? It'll be under, well, we won't have the names. Okay.
The composer will be named.
Okay.
Maybe some of the solo people will be named. When I conduct a movie, and I've done over 80 movies that I've conducted the score to, they do put your name. Orchestra conducted by Michael Nowak, or Mike Nowak, or Mike Nowak, or Mike Nowak with a C, or it doesn't matter as long as
It's you.
it's me. They know by now.
Yeah.
And it's always a challenge, and I think it's one of those things where it's nice to be around people that are creating at the same time. Because we're sight reading, and because the music often is really difficult, you have to problem solve immediately.
Say more about that.
So if you give me a piece of music and say, come back tomorrow with that, I can go home and I can work it out really slowly and find out what the best fingering is or how the hands work together.
Really prepare.
Right.
Yeah.
If I get it now and they just say, turn that page, and we go, uh-oh, that's going to be a little tricky. Everybody's thinking that at the same time. And then you can go, well, what are you going to do there? What shall we do there? And the options happen. And so it's kind of nice sharing that creative process together. Problem solving,
Yeah.
it is. So, that's the nice thing about it. It's the same education every day. We're learning. And we're counting, and we're counting, and we're counting.
Right. Yeah.
People say, you still count? Yes, you have to count.
Yeah. You made the bridge, and I was just going to make it, and so thank you for making it, because you're bridging between what you are doing as a career, part of your career, that problem solving, that sight reading, and you made bridges to reading anyway. I mean, just if you practice the reading, it's so much easier. Or if you get something for the first time and have to read it cold out loud to the class, for example.
Perfect.
The more you've practiced, the more you have confidence in doing that. The less you've practiced, you're a little bit worried that maybe you'll make a mistake. But also that problem solving, that's what we ask our students to do all the time, and say that's what's going to be when you leave high school and college, and exactly what you said. So thank you for making that bridge.
Yeah.
All right, so Los Angeles, you go there all the time, but you did go there from Dallas.
Yes.
And then how?
I conducted an orchestra there in LA for a couple of years. It was for a young conductor and college students, and just out of college. And so we were all kind of in the educational process ourselves. I was learning the conducting skill. They were learning their orchestral skills. And so it was a program that still is around today. It's called the Young Musicians Foundation Debut Orchestra.
Okay.
And many famous conductors have come through there. Many famous players have come through there. And it's a wonderful, again, educational situation where you can learn repertoire, kind of like a theater company. Yeah. So I was like the director of the theater company, and these were the actors of learning their roles and their parts and learning Shakespeare or whatever. And after that, I played in the Los Angeles Chamber Orchestra with Sir Neville Marriner for 5 years, which was another education, and learning different styles of playing and that kind of thing. And then in 1984, I was able to get the job in San Luis Obispo as a music director of the San Luis Obispo Symphony. And that's what brought me to the Central Coast.
Okay.
And I stayed with that group for 31 years and had a great time. And we really built up a wonderful orchestra up there, and toured Spain, and we went to Carnegie Hall, and we went to Disney Hall, and we went to the Sydney Opera House, and
Amazing.
Traveled together and had lots of fun together.
Amazing.
And brought the Central Coast there to let people know what we're doing here is very important, and a very high level of performance as well.
Right.
And that's why Santa Maria right now, when the Santa Maria Philharmonic opening came up, it was a good time because there was a transition going on, and this opportunity opened up here with the Santa Maria Philharmonic. And I'm just so happy that I said yes. Again,
Went through the door.
I did.
Yes, you did.
And now I'm learning this area. I'm learning the people here, and getting to meet you and folks involved in education, because, again, I'll always go back to those early days of my own life and wish that were for other people as well. And especially now, I think this area is just ripe for music education. I have a summer camp that I run each year in Arroyo Grande, and I take kids from this area and I mix them together with kids from South Central LA and from Salinas, and there's all kinds of different backgrounds and financial, backgrounds. How much they've had lessons have been involved, and put these kids together and watch them develop over a week as people in a very safe and nurturing and cultural environment for them. And it's just mind-boggling how good they can get in a very short time,
Right.
and how much they share with each other. I'm a big believer that the more you offer students as far as expression, music, drama, sports, team efforts, the better they'll feel about themselves, because people help each other.
Right.
So if, we encourage each other, we want each other to succeed, because the more you succeed, the more I succeed. And so it makes a better community in the long run.
What is the name of that camp in the summer in Arroyo Grande?
Rio Grande, it's called the String Summer Academy, and it's usually in July for 1 week, and it's overnight. There's cabins up there, and the kids stay overnight there, and it's just wonderful.
Sounds like you ended the earlier part of the explanation by using the word community, and it sounds like you really do build community there for the week, and students can shed some of their other identities and actually become that musician and support one another to be successful in the community of other musicians, no matter where they're from or their backgrounds.
Totally right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I've loved about my life, and the fact that I've been able to knock down the barriers of prejudice that I had when I was younger. And, my life is, I've go back to experiences from post-World War II, all those years where we thought these people weren't great, or the Cold War where we didn't think these people were great, and yet when I'm around them and we're making music, or when if I'm traveling to Germany to play Bach in Germany, I love the German people. I love their life. I love what they, and I had prejudice about that because my father fought in World War II. And so there was sort of these aren't good people. But everybody's a good person. In a way, everybody could be a really good person given the right environment, encouragement, nourishment, and allowed to be creative.
Yeah, and that's what you're bringing into the Philharmonic as you're envisioning the education component, the educational component, educational for the young students in our schools. Can you say a little bit about what it is that you're wanting to do and doing for students in schools here?
Well, I'm really happy that the Philharmonic is completely devoted to bringing children to concerts. And so we have watched over the last couple of years the exponential growth of our concert goers coming for our children programs. So this year, again, in January, we'll be at the Pacific Christian Church, which holds a lot of people, 999 people. But we fill that up with students that are bussed in from Santa Maria area, even other outside, Orcutt, maybe Guadalupe or Nipomo, whatever we can outreach to these schools and say, hey, we've got a wonderful program for you. One of the programs that we really love doing is something that my wife and I created when I was with San Luis Obispo Symphony, and it's a program called Fly Me to the Moon. And it's a combination of music and science and history and imagination and creativity and putting it all together to make a story out of what flight is all about, how people watched things fly and said, how do I do that? And
What a great title for that.
Fly Me to the Moon.
Yes.
And then I have a wonderful singer named Inga Swearingen. I don't know if you know Inga, but she's a fabulous singer. She teaches at Cuesta College, She's a jazz singer, and she sings the song Fly Me to the Moon, and she scat sings, which is really great for the kids to hear because they've never heard scat singing. So she's like Ella Fitzgerald. And while that's happening, we have a lot of things on the movie screen. So pictures from the moon taken by the astronauts when they were, Neil Armstrong was stepping on the moon, and the whole program like that. And then we go from there and we travel beyond into outer space, using classical music as sort of our travel guide.
Say a bit about who developed this program.
Fly Me to the Moon? My wife, Suzette Harbor.
And talk about her. How did you meet her?
Well, the wonderful thing about Suzette is that she's a storyteller. She's a professional storyteller, which is unfortunately not high in the employment ranks these days. And so she tells world stories. And her vision is that when you put together a concert, when you put together a children's concert, you have to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, just like a regular story would. So the characters are involved, the plot's involved, there's a ending of some kind, or a mission, or a message. And then we bring the music in to kind of guide us through that story. So Fly Me to the Moon opens up with a piece by Tchaikovsky, the Serenade for Strings, and we see those beautiful photos from the Hubble telescope of the galaxies and the nebulae, and those picturesque photos that were taken, that's things that are happening way out there in the universe. And then we bring it back to the first time you look up in the sky and you see a star and you say to your mom and dad, "What's that light up there?" And they say, "Well, that's a star." What is that? So we're learning a little bit about it, and then what we do is we take Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, the song, and we have all the different parts of the orchestra demonstrate that song. So we hear the strings, we hear the woodwinds, we hear the brass, percussion, and then we put it all together. We have the harp. And then from there we go to watching things that fly, birds, bees, butterflies, and amazed that they all leave the ground because we can't leave the ground. So how do they do that? And I say, how do they do that? And the kids go, wings. Okay. So then we've taken, and Suzette took a long time to find these things, old photos of those guys that were the old films of the guys running with their skates and flapping and thinking they could leave and just going off the cliff and things like that. And then finally leading us to all the way to the moon and now beyond that. And we go off into the planets and Jupiter and Pluto. And then at the end we make just a reverence and an homage to all the people that got us there. Leonardo da Vinci, who created those first sketches of what an airplane might look like, and Amelia Earhart, Carl Sagan, Einstein. So it's called Fly Me to the Moon from J.S. Spock to Dr. Spock, a story of flight and flight of imagination.
Michael, when you describe Fly Me to the Moon, and as you just did, I have to tell you that I'm hearing it. I feel like I see it and hear it. You are as much a storyteller, I think, as you describe Suzette is, and I feel like I've just been flown.
Oh, good.
And really taken somewhere really very special. I also want to say that you said at the very beginning your parents were educators, and I feel like that is something that you have in you. Here we have your influence here in Santa Maria Valley and with our students. So I want to say it was such a pleasure to talk with you this afternoon and get to know you. And I'm so glad that we got an opportunity for you to share the story with the audience today. Michael, thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Susan. I really appreciate it.
I'm Susan Salcido, Santa Barbara County Superintendent of Schools, and thank you so much for joining us today for this edition of Local Leaders.